Welcome to Three Peas in a Pod. My name's Lenora Turner. I'm your host. This is about purpose, pathways, and perspectives. And for the episode today, I have with me Kathy Townsend. Kathy, if you don't know, helps me behind the scenes with this podcast. She's a terrific friend and critical for me to stay on a path here. So, Kathy, we're going to talk today about what?
We're going to talk about grief awareness and how to handle loss.
Because it's 2020, and I think a lot of people have faced losses. I know all throughout life, off and on, and in different parts of anybody's world, we're facing losses at different times, but it just seemed like a good topic to touch on because of this particular year.
Definitely a lot has been going on in 2020.
For me, I have a whole lot to be thankful for this year, and yet I've definitely had certain challenges. But I know for me, a couple of years ago was unprecedented for me with some losses and things to face, which honestly made it more of a difficult year. This one's different for different reasons. But yeah, so grief awareness. We are not experts. I am certainly not an expert. I've started digging into this topic when I was facing the serious illness of several family members. I literally went and found a book that would help me on grief because I didn't know how to do it. So I want to bring up a book a couple times during this podcast called The Grief Recovery Handbook by John W. James and Russell Friedman. I mean, I've cried before, but I didn't know how to face certain major losses in my life.
I can't imagine there's any adult person, and probably most children even, who haven't experienced some kind of loss there's various degrees of loss that we have to deal with. And it seems to, once we reach adulthood, they seem to get more difficult, or at least we remember them in that way sometimes. But there's lots of different kinds of losses. Do you want to talk about some of the different kinds of losses there are out there?
Yeah. And even right before that is, you and I talked about this a little bit ahead of time, and it really is a great statement in the book that I mentioned. And that is, most of us know how to increase. We're taught how to build your life, build your career, build your wealth, build your friendships, build your marriage, build. And good, we're trying to, hopefully you really dig in and don't assume that you should know everything, but you do honestly learn how to build things, how to understand money, how to understand things about relationship. But what we don't have a lot of classes on is how do you lose? How to be a better loser.
Right.
You and I talked about that.
Yeah.
Who wants to lose? That's not the goal. Here's how to lose. But we have losses in life. And like you said, there's a lot of different kinds of losses. So I think sometimes when people think about grief, and I think I was one of these people, is I tended to think of grief only when someone died.
Yeah.
Someone's passed away. Clearly there is grief when somebody passes away, but there's a lot of other things that can be losses. And sometimes you need to take some time to grieve for those. Sometimes it's really easy. Sometimes it's a process. So some of the types of losses, it can be the loss of health, the loss of a relationship, like a divorce. Certainly there needs to be time to grieve, but there can be losses of friendships, even for a reason of you just moved away. You could have a loss of job, but there's other types of losses that we don't always think about. A loss of a schedule. Think of a loss of normal this year. We all lost. What the heck is normal?
Right. Everybody's had to make changes of some kind, or is dealing with people who have had to make changes.
Yeah. And you know what? Speaking of changes, when you change so many things that became habit for you throughout your day, I mean, a lot of times when you go to a job or you have a routine, you drive the same way, you have a certain way you get up and the way you process your morning and what you do on your way home, all that kind of stuff. It's fairly routine. It actually goes to a subconscious level. You don't have to think too much about it. When all of that changes, not only might you grieve the loss, you're also tired. You can be exhausted because everything that you didn't have to consciously think about is now in front of your face and you had to change it again. Now, a lot of us went through those stressful, exhausting changes at the beginning part of this COVID thing. But then, my gosh, the roller coaster of, is school on, is school off? Do I have a job? Do I not have a job? Do I have a new job? Did it go away? Talk about exhausting just for the changes. And then in some cases, you want to grieve. You're sad because of those losses. So again, we're not experts, but whether it's a sense of safety, a sense of security in the whole world, what the heck is going on, what's going to change with the different government leadership, or everything to do with 2020.
Right. In isolation, where we're having to not see our families as much for most of us, or many of us. The poor kids, they're not going to school to socialize. Everything's online, and parents are doing the online thing for their children, as well as many of them are doing the online thing for their own work and their home lives. And so and then juggling kids who aren't even in school. So, there's just so many different things that like my daughter is one of those. She's dealing with all of that. And there's a lot of different ways that it's difficult. And for me, the isolation away from them, as like we used to do, it's so sad that they're not in physical school. So our schedules can be more adjusted, but I still don't get to participate in that because I don't get to see them like I used to for health reasons, just I'm in isolation for a bit. So anyway, there's lots of different kind of losses. It's hard.
Yeah. When I've talked to a few young adults recently about some of their changes, I think after a while they're wondering, like, why am I struggling? Why am I feeling sad? I think after a while we have said, okay, it's a big change, but we're in this new normal. And now we start thinking it shouldn't be hard anymore. No, this is a heck of a year. You can say to yourself, you're struggling because this has been really hard, rather than wondering, why am I not feeling normal again? Why am I not? And some people are operating very differently. And some people, they've actually had business success this year because of the type of business they had. There are so many different versions of 2020 going on.
Right.
But obviously we're talking about those facing all that sense of what the heck has happened to my life, in the sense of normal, or who knows what the losses might be.
Right.
So yeah, that grief awareness. And like you said, I certainly understand this isolation thing. I'm an empty nester I would say on steroids, because of being in quarantine so many times. And thankfully I can interact off and on. And I certainly had a certain section of this year, which, everybody was pretty locked down, especially where I was at. Mm-hmm. And I know for me, part of it is you better like who you live with, because you're with yourself. You have a lot of time with that person. And that's a whole process too. There are so many different changes going on that I think we have to be aware that we need to grieve as well as make changes. And all the changes can be exhausting. You might need to be nice to yourself and kind of acknowledge what you lost.
Yeah. Well, how do you know when you're grieving or when someone else is grieving? How would you know that?
Well, I suppose there's a number of things, and people talk about, there's these 5 stages of grief: disbelief, anger, confusion or bargaining, sorrow, and then acceptance and trying to move forward. But those things don't necessarily happen in order, and they can come in waves depending on how big the loss was. If you feel really just disconnected to relationships or disconnected from your own feelings, that could be a sign. You need to grieve. You need to be kind and pause and allow yourself to grieve. And that's, again, it can be a process. It's just a word, but it may mean a lot of different things. They say, whoever they are, but they say, and it's in this book that I mentioned earlier, that unprocessed grief is said to be an underlying cause of addictions and depression. So way before 2020, based on what happened in people's past, sometimes the reason people are dealing with so many emotional challenges, or they're struggling holding on to a job, they're struggling keeping a relationship. Sometimes it's because they have so much unprocessed brokenness inside, or losses they didn't know how to process, that it's stuck in there and it's hindering other things. It's causing them to want to run to alcohol, run to a drug, something to numb this pain or take away this feeling that they don't know how to handle. So that's a big deal. So I think understanding grief, learning how to process grief, as well as finding positive ways to move forward. And sometimes you're doing some of both.
Yeah.
Did I say more than your question was?
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like, though, that when you're not processing grief properly, that it can cause harmful circumstances or results from that.
Side effects.
So there's a lot of good reasons to get it processed, to deal with it, and to not let it go on unprocessed for a long time. I imagine it impacts your relationships and your, your work life, your home life. It's hard. And, even if it's caused by your work relationship or a home relationship or the losing of somebody, we still need to deal with them.
Yeah, I can jump into an old story. I hesitate because I think, is this too much information? When I went through a very painful relationship being broken and lost, 8 years ago, and how much it hurt. And I remember how it did impact my work somewhat. And I had conversations even at the time with my employer saying, I feel like I'm at about 70% of what I can produce normally because I am limping my way through that particular year. I know at times when someone would ask me, how are you doing? I was like, uh-oh, if you really care, I might crumple into the floor and sob for a while. I remember literally one time walking to a hallway, a stairwell, and I just sat down and sobbed. And that's not normal behavior for me on the job. It just is. I believe in hard work. I believe in all these things. But it's like sometimes where I was like, uh-oh, I was really in a lot of pain and I needed to take steps away. And for me, it was a divorce. It's like, if you knew me, it's like, that just doesn't happen to me. That just doesn't happen in my life. I mean, who plans on that?
Right.
But there's so many different factors as to why something like that could happen. But I remember being at home, and sometimes I would tell my teenage kids, hey, I'm going to go in the other room and cry for a while. I'll be back. I would just let them know because I wasn't going to pretend I was fine. I had hope. I knew that I'd get through it. But it was brutal for my heart. And knowing that I could step away, cry when I need to cry, talk when I need to talk. So for me, and I remember one time it was actually a couple of years later, I felt like I should take this class that was called Divorce Care. Oh, I am getting so personal here. But anyway, it was a 3-month class. I forget how long it is, but it's actually really, really good. And I remember one time talking about some piece of what I was going through in that class, and I couldn't understand what was going on because I was feeling so unfocused and almost like I was going crazy. And someone said, oh, you need to grieve. I thought, what? Oh. And I didn't realize that I didn't know how to process these feelings, but so much was going on inside that it was fogging my head. I couldn't even think straight. And I really was like, oh, it's sort of like you have a clogged sink. I don't know if that's the right analogy, but stuff is not processing normally. And I was like, well, great. Well, how do I do that? And there wasn't exact answers, but in that particular instance, they would give you things that you kind of talk through or jot notes on. And it led to me just having a gush of tears. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel sane again.
I like that you said that you, I guess just going back a little bit, that you told your kids that you were going to cry. And because they obviously knew you were going through a divorce. They lived in your home.
They were going through it too.
And well, exactly.
And really
so you set the example of that crying is a natural process of it, and that it's okay to do that. And if, you can do it privately or with somebody if you wanted to, but I love that you did that. That was good. And that you went and got some help. You sought out some help, I think is also a positive thing. Sometimes we can deal with these things on our own, but sometimes it takes a professional or a group or a good friend to help us through challenging times. So we can.
Oh, I'm a fan of all of it.
Yeah. And I love that the whoever it was whether it was your instructor or a fellow in your divorce care class that recognized that you needed to grieve, something you hadn't even thought of. So sometimes it's good to have people who can explain that, or something that you can just like, oh, okay, that's what I'm needing right now is to grieve. And it probably made sense to you when you thought about it, that you're grieving a loss.
Yeah. And sometimes I knew I was grieving. I mean, I probably cried in that year more than I had all years put together. I don't know if that's really true, but I remember thinking, and I wasn't crying all the time, but I cried a lot. It was just gushing in different losses. And again, different types of losses are different processes. Yeah. Several years later, I went through some really difficult losses when my mother passed away. And 3 months prior to that, and I think I bring this up on a different podcast, actually, little bits of it, is where my children's father passed away. Now, it was a very different relationship for me at that time but I got very involved. I cared about the human. It was just different.
Sure.
But it was so much stress and hard, and to watch an awful disease happening. And then 3 months later to go through it again. The stress that you feel, the hurt that you feel. And there's several things that we do sometimes to not help ourselves deal with grief.
What do you mean by that?
Well, going back to this book, I need to interview this author because there's so many good nuggets here, and there's a lot of other resources, I'm sure. But sometimes what we do is tell ourselves, oh, don't feel bad. Or be strong for someone else. Just, keep it together. Now, I knew I did when I'm dealing with a divorce, or when I was dealing with tandem diseases in family members that did not end the way we hoped. You are managing yourself, and you're trying, as a mom, your heart is trying to make sure your kids are okay. So you can try to carry the world, or at least your portion of the world, and try to tell yourself, I got to be strong, or don't feel bad. Now, there's times where you are strong, you take steps, but I didn't want to pretend that I'm stronger than I was. I remember pulling up to a friend's house when I dropped my son off to visit, because they were lifelong friends. And she was shocked at what had happened with our family, as was I. And I remember her saying, wow, you're doing so well. And I don't know how you're so strong. And I remember telling her, you know what? I don't want to be strong.
Yeah.
I don't want to have to be strong. I'm just taking steps, doing what I need to do. But trust me, I don't want to have to be strong. I would rather not be dealing with this. And about a month later, one of her sons passed away in just a sad accident. And they had to walk through the hurt of that. And boy, did she gain understanding she never wanted about how do you be strong. But you don't want to take that in a way that you don't allow yourself to grieve. You don't allow yourself to break, to fall down emotionally and lose it. And to say, I don't know how to do this. I don't know what to do. And another thing people tend to do is think they're somehow supposed to do alone. That became a mantra of mine when I talked with my kids, because I couldn't get them to read the book I wanted them to read. When their father was going to be passing away, I was grabbing resources. I was trying to learn. I don't know how to do this. Yeah. I don't know how to walk through this one, And so I was grabbing resources because I want information. I tend to be that kind of one. Give me some information so I can have some tools. And so I got a couple copies, and I was hoping I wanted them to read a book. And they were not in the mood to read a book. But what I could do is take some of the mantras that I knew were critical, because I know how common it is, and the book talks about this, how we think we're somehow supposed to do this alone. And it became a mantra. We don't do this alone. We do this together. We don't do this alone. And I've said that again in 2020. I say that now. We don't do this alone. When someone's dealing with depression and somebody's called me, I say, thank you so much for calling me. Thank you for telling me what you're struggling with. I want them to know it's a good thing to talk about it. It's a good thing. If you're wondering, do I want to be on this planet? It's a good thing to talk to somebody about that. I went through that in my 20s, where I didn't want to be necessarily on the planet during 2 years of my life. It was, I would say, some mental health challenges. I was really isolating myself, not because of a pandemic, but because I wasn't willing to show that I was weak, to show that I didn't know how to get through the spot I was in my head, the spot that I was in my emotions. And I was trying to look like I was all together, and I was falling apart. I seriously, in my early 20s, for a period of time, I thought, I think I should check myself in somewhere. I think I'm losing it. And I didn't, but I was darn close. I didn't even know where I was going to go. But I understand pain. I understand isolating yourself, whether or not it's because of a pandemic. A lot of people do that because they don't want to admit, I think my mental health is wacky right now. I think I don't know what's going on. I don't know how to do this. So many times we don't know how to lose, or we don't know why we feel broken. But it's a human thing, sadly, to go through losses. So I think instead of just knowing how to build, we need to know how to let go. How do I process loss? How do I respect myself through this? How do I give myself time to deal with it? And how do I get tools at least to learn? And again, I am no expert. I am just want to help people not feel ashamed of having a problem. You're human. We have problems.
It's more
Relevant?
It's happening more in 2020 than it has in other years. It's unprecedented how much people are suffering from sadness, from loss, and we need assurances that we're not alone. We need assurances that there's help for us, that we can help ourselves, or we can reach out. I think I love what you did is you made someone feel safe when they contacted you. You told them how good it was that they contacted you and reached out to you, and that you were glad to talk to them and to try to help them. So you probably did a lot of reassuring there, that we all need that reassurance that it's okay to reach out to a trusted friend or to other resources. So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome. I know it's important for people to not grieve alone, to not go through life alone, to know that you're very normal, that we all struggle. We all wonder, what the heck am I going to do? Who knows? And that tears are something to be respected. They can help you feel sane again. I don't care if you're a male or female. And it helps to know how you're wired personally too. Some people tend to be more controlling. They're the really great organizers, everything A, B, C, D, they put everything in order, and you want them in your life because they help your life be organized. They do your taxes, they do who knows what, but they are very much ordered. And so sometimes those people have a tighter control or want to take a tighter grip on control. And yet with 2020, you just, so many things you don't have control over. So if you know how you are wired, you may know, hey, I'm going to have to pay a little more attention to my desire to control everything, because guess what? You don't have control over a lot. Others are more laid back and they wonder what somebody would chill out. Well, you don't realize we also have a core wiring. Though it's a great strength in one area, it can be a weakness in another. So if you know that you want to really have control, you are probably more stressed out than somebody else who isn't as wired so tightly that way. But with them, they can feel so scattered because they like the randomness. They want things different, but now it's so different. They have a hard time staying in order at all or organized at all. So every strength has its weakness, but knowing yourself, are you an introvert versus an extrovert? You don't have to become the other. You just need to know, hey, sometimes people need a little more time alone than somebody else, but you don't have to go through this whole process alone. Others, you're a words person. You need to talk a little bit more. And not everyone has a ton of time to talk all the time. So you might want to get a counselor. I think everyone should at times have a counselor, have someone they talk to, whether you pay for it or it's a friend, depending on how your friendships are right now. So those are healthy, normal things for humans to do. It's not something to be embarrassed about. It just isn't. And then you can even journal, write stuff down, write it, whether it's a sentence or two, or you really want to write a lot down, process some of your feelings, find ways to go, what's going on in me? And listen to yourself. Sometimes we'll listen to somebody else, but we do a terrible job ever stopping and listening to our own heart and say, I'm really angry. You know, whatever it might be.
Right.
And I am no expert. I just know how many ways I struggled and how much pain I suffered because I really was convinced in my 20s, I was, God forbid I tell anybody, I felt like I think I might be crazy. I mean, that was a season. I remember coming out of it going, wow, like you were unstable. I didn't know how to just relax and have fun and whatever. And by the way, that can be a piece of things too. You don't have to always be processing grief. There's times where you need to just have fun. Doesn't matter what's falling down around the world. You just need to let go for a while and have some fun.
That's good. I think those are helpful. You've said some helpful things to help us to help ourselves or help others that we care about or that come to us. So I value the information that you gave. What if your challenge, your change, your loss is something that is your fault, or at least partly your fault. Does that change how you handle it?
It certainly adds a piece, and part of that is forgiveness.
Forgiveness
Sometimes if somebody
too.
else broke something, you may forgive them, but sometimes you broke it. You did things. And that's a piece of Humpty Dumpty coming back together, is forgiving yourself. Welcome to humanity.
Yeah.
I'm one who certainly is a believer in God, and somebody said this, and I like this statement, where God can still reconcile. He can bring hope. He can restore your life. And he factored in stupid along the way. He factored in our ability to screw stuff up.
Yeah. Well, we do enough of that. So that's great that that's factored in. So forgiving yourself, I guess it just acknowledging that you've made a mistake is part of that
And sometimes it's not that it is. And sometimes it's like, it truly is saying, I forgive me for doing that. Because you can make it, you want to go, I want things to be different. If I had done this differently, and you hang on to it so badly because you know how different it could have been if you did something different. So it makes it really hard to let that mistake go. But if you don't forgive yourself, you're just going to keep tripping over it. You're going to keep pulling yourself down. So if you don't want to anchor yourself into a problem, you're going to have to decide to have great mercy on yourself, or maybe great mercy on somebody else. Merciful, forgive. And if you're forgiving someone else or yourself, you're actually doing it for your own freedom more than for them. It's a good thing for the other person, certainly if you want to reconcile the relationship. But if you want to reconcile the relationship with yourself, you have to also forgive. And sometimes it's doesn't feel as heavy, but it's more of a, hey, can you let yourself be human instead of expecting yourself that you have to do everything right and you should have, and you're just so hard on yourself. You got to get better at allowing humanity, your own humanity,
right,
to be a piece of your life's journey, because it's there.
Yeah, I know that it took a long time in my life for me to even hear the words forgive yourself. I was fairly quick, and I've gotten so much better at forgiving others, but that's something that I don't even know how I became aware of it, but forgiving yourself. And that was the hardest thing for me to do, was to forgive myself for things. And whether it was a silly thing I said, or, something even bigger, it weighed so heavy on me. It made me ill inside. It was so hard on myself. And when I learned to start to just recognize it and to forgive myself, I would try it, and I felt so much better. It was giving. It was just so giving to myself to do that. And I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm going to try not to remake those mistakes. But, just the same, I need to forgive myself and to, give myself a break.
Why do you think you were so hard on yourself?
Probably the perfectionism, probably not wanting to forget that thing, so I never did it again. So I would just replay it and lose sleep, and my gut would be in a turmoil. And I've gotten better, and I'm healthier for it. So mentally and physically, I'm healthier for it. So thank you for mentioning that. It took me a long time before I even thought about those words.
Yeah. I think your relationship with yourself is so core to how you're going to relate to others. And for whatever reasons, we learn how to treat ourselves certain ways. But if we're always thinking we have to perform for everyone else, you may have a harder time, letting yourself grieve, because you think, I got to perform. I'm supposed to feel fine. I need to act like I'm all together. Time will fix it all. Yeah, time can help, but it doesn't fix everything. You have to be willing to grieve. You have to be willing to face those losses. Some of that's journaling. Again, I highly recommend books like this, or like I said, if it was a relationship, then maybe the divorce care. There's one called Grief Share. There's classes. You can usually look those up online. Again, this one is the Grief Recovery Handbook. And I know there's a lot more out there, but we have to learn how to do this. Because I so wish January 1st that's coming, it's going to solve everything. But I kind of don't think it's going to. So we got to understand how to make adjustments better. How do we deal with all this change? It's a process. And I am no expert. We don't want to pretend this podcast is expertise. These are us, a couple of friends talking, although I talked way too much, Kathy.
Not at all.
But get yourself some tools. Get yourself some knowledge about how the heck do I handle loss? Because I think that when you don't deal with grief, it's kind of like a cloudy sky that gets so dark, so gloomy. You begin to wonder, was it ever a blue sky? Was there ever a sun? And who wants to live forever in a storm?
Mm-hmm.
And yet, even in a storm, because this one has been going for a while, but in a storm, you can have some amazing parties along the way. It's amazing healing, amazing journey towards greater freedom. And I want that to be trite, because I think you have to, on purpose, have hope for your future, because I promise you there can be a great one. But again, I'm always going to go back to my faith, my faith in a good God. So I can't help it. That's I don't know how people get through life without that. But however you do it, you need hope for your future.
Right. Right. And being thankful, I think that's something that you mentioned in your last podcast was, helping to lift yourself up and to be thankful about things and look around and on purpose, look at things that you can be thankful for, that, okay, the sky is not falling. There are some good things right in front of us that are good. So it's not all dark. There is some light as well in our lives, and to be looking for that.
Yeah, look for it. Yeah, absolutely. What you set your mind on, your brain will start searching for. What's that, reticular activation system? Is that what it was called? When you're buying a car and you start looking for a certain type, now you see it everywhere.
Yeah.
If you look for things to be thankful for, you look for ways that you can be positive, you'll begin to see more of it, because your mind becomes automatic search engine.
Good.
So set your search engine on things that are good, because you'll begin finding more of them. It's a big deal. Thank you so much for saying that. Well, we know we've gone on for a little bit of time here. I'm not exactly sure how long, but again, get yourself some tools. Learn more about how to recover from grief. There's another book I've mentioned, did a podcast on earlier episode called Struggle Well. It was about PTSD and such with Ken Falk and the Boulder Crest Foundation. But that book, Struggle Well, has some fantastic tools in it of how do you move forward? How do you get past traumas? How do you restructure your life? It's work, but it's worth it. You can build the life that you want, but we need each other. We need people, and we have to learn.
That's good. Are there things we should or shouldn't say to people who are grieving?
There's a list of them.
Oh.
I'm not going to go through a list, but a couple of thoughts. I think often we're uncomfortable with other people being uncomfortable. We don't want people to hurt. So sometimes it's out of a kind of a sort of a compassion. We want them to feel fine. We want things to be better for them. And so we shut down any talk about real emotions. So often people are uncomfortable and they don't know what to say. So if somebody has passed away, or somebody has, like, oh my gosh, people have said, well, thank God you have a couple more children. Oh my gosh, as if the loss of one can somehow be minimized because you have others. Yeah, so don't say a lot of things if you don't know what to say. Sometimes the best thing to do is just say, I am so sorry for your loss. Or just saying, I love you. I'm so sorry you hurt.
Yeah.
Or anything along the line of, no, don't try and fix it for them. Unless they want you to give some advice to fix it, or not fix it, but to move forward. But you can just care about them. A quote by John Maxwell is, in the middle of a crisis, people aren't taking notes. They come to you most often to hear that you care.
That's good.
So somehow expressing, I care about you. Thank you for sharing with me. Thank you for letting me be in this with you. There's all kinds of things, but try not to immediately fix it.
Yeah.
They have losses. And even if you had a loss that was similar, it's not the same. Their relationship was different than your relationship. Their season. So don't always say something like, I know exactly how you feel. No, you probably don't. Just say, I understand hurt. I'm so sorry you hurt. And I just care. Express care.
That's perfect.
It's respect the process, I guess. That's the simplest way. And then read the books. There's just a lot of notes in there that I don't remember.
Talk to the experts. That's great. I'm sure that a lot of people were helped today by the words that you said and the.
You too.
With experience, sometimes we learn some good things, and I'm grateful that you share them.
Thank you. Well, it's something that I think Mike Rose said it. Maybe other people did too, but the comment that we're all in the same storm of this COVID and everything going on, but we're not in the same boat. There's all kinds of different sizes and boats in this storm. So know that whatever you're going through, somebody else is going through it differently. So respect each other, do what we can to be a builder for the hope for the future. Now I'm just rambling. But thanks for listening to 3 Peas in a Pod, as we just talked about a perspective on grief awareness. Like Kathy said before we started this, how do we be better losers? I thought we had a good laugh. We will gain and lose in life, and knowing how to let ourselves grieve is a piece of wholeness. So thanks for listening.